What is domestic violence in Arizona? Domestic violence is actually a label that's given to certain crimes when they're committed against a domestic partner, a family member, somebody you had some form of domestic relationship, a child. But in and of itself, domestic violence is not an offense. It's an added tag that's added to the offense. So for example, you would have assault, right? If you assaulted somebody and that person happened to be somebody you had a romantic relationship with or somebody you lived with, then it would be an assault domestic violence charge. Contrary to popular belief, in the state of Arizona, domestic violence does not require the use of violence. Yeah, so you can be convicted of domestic violence offense even though you never engaged in a violent behavior. For example, disorderly conduct, criminal damage, the list goes on, and there's a list on my website if you want to take a look. It just depends on the specific charges, and there's a list of charges. Not all crimes can be domestic violence, but there's a great many of them. When a crime or a charge has been labeled as a domestic violence offense, there's additional requirements that the courts and, if you're convicted, you have to meet. For example, one of the main issues is you will have to do some type of a domestic violence offender treatment, and the particular type of probation will be qualified as domestic violence probation. And another thing is, contact with the victim and stuff is more limited. Sometimes you become a prohibited possessor. And that means you can no longer possess a firearm for the rest of your life. It depends on the specific charges. Not all the time, but some of the time that would also be it. So domestic violence can affect your constitutional right to bear arms. So it's a very important thing that you address these issues before you actually take a plea or before you actually go to trial. You want to talk to somebody who knows what they're doing to address your potential consequences of your specific charges before you make a decision, because these consequences are not your normal consequences, even if you're facing a misdemeanor. Apart from the fact of having these extra consequences, there's something called aggravated domestic violence. This is a Class 5 felony. Aggravated domestic violence means that you've committed a third domestic violence offense within 7 years. If you have 2 prior domestic violence charges, which are misdemeanors, right? You just did some probation or whatever. Your third one would be an aggravated domestic violence felony, and you have to do at least 4 months in jail before you qualify for probation, mandatory. If it's your fourth or more, that means if you have 3 domestic violence offenses, the fourth or more, then you have to do at least 8 months in jail before you qualify for probation. It's very important that you understand these consequences before you say anything to the police. Once the cops are there, it's no longer a trivial matter. 2 spouses are arguing and one of them calls the cops or whatever. Probably somebody's gonna go to jail that night, okay? There's statutes that say that the cops have to determine if anybody's in danger, and if they do, they have to take you to jail, okay, on a domestic violence offense to cool off. Not all the time, but most of the time that happens. So you need to be very careful. A lot of people try to play down what happened because sometimes it's just an argument between spouses. The problem is when the cops are called, it's no longer an argument between spouses. It's an actual criminal investigation. You should ask for a lawyer. You should not answer questions, exercise your right to remain silent, and get some advice before you make any admissions. I have been representing people charged with domestic violence since 2009. I have also prosecuted people for commission of domestic violence offenses. I know what a domestic violence charge entails, I know what the state needs to prove, and I know how to defend it. You need to speak to somebody as soon as you can before you actually make any admissions and just make your case worse. We're ready to help. We're open 24/7, call. We'll give you a free consultation. You will sit with me, we will talk to me, and we will review your case and see what defenses you have.